You don't have to add something to that checklist every single week. In fact, what works best is to have no new technique on the week that you introduce a new model.
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudewa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Chief Marketing Officer. Our goal is to equip teachers and teaching parents with methods and materials which will aid them in training their students to become confident and competent communicators and thinkers. So, Andrew, it's convention season.
Yes, and 2021 looks like it will be different than 2020 in that regard.
Yes, I think in 2020 you went to one half of one convention.
I think that was about it, yes.
And then everything got shut down, and now you've been out a couple times.
Well, yeah, I was in Nebraska, and then the very next week, South Carolina, and then St. Louis, St. Charles for the great homeschool there. And so far, pretty much everything's still on. No cancellations that I know of at this point. So it's good. It's good to be back out, meeting people, seeing old friends, hearing stories. I particularly enjoy interacting with children. So I like conventions where there's kids that will, talk to you. And sometimes they want my autograph because they saw me on a video.
Yes.
Sometimes they want to give me a letter or a story they wrote and lots of pictures. So it's been great. And of course, so many new homeschoolers are having the opportunity to go to a convention for the very first time.
Right.
And I'm guessing there's going to be 10-20% of convention attendees are relatively new to homeschooling and that world.
Right. Did you know, I learned this years ago, and you probably know this, but maybe our listeners don't know this. There are many full-time teachers who attend homeschool conventions just to get ideas for their classroom.
Yes. I think more and more.
Yes.
And
especially because of the virtual learning that they're having to do in some cases.
Right. And of course, hybrid schools and programs and charters. A lot of times those people are very interested to learn more about the homeschool world because so many of their clientele live in that world. So to make a good fit between, a teacher or tutor in a hybrid school and the homeschool family, the more everyone can learn about each other, the better that'll go.
Absolutely. Do you know I first heard about the Institute for Excellence in Writing at a homeschool convention in Southern California in 1995.
1995?
Yes.
That would have had to be the first year I ever went to.
Well, you were not there.
I wasn't even there.
No, you were not there.
But
in
you
fact,
heard about it from...
I heard about you. So a friend of mine, it might have been 96. Nope, it was 97. Okay, but it was right in that range, right? And I was looking for a writing program to teach my then elementary, middle school aged boys, because we had started this program. And we had instructors coming. People do it all the time now, but at the time it was kind of this rare thing to do, a formal co-op that I had run. And we just could not find a good writing curriculum. And my friend said, hey, the people over at Beautiful Feet Books know of this guy. And I called that guy. And, well, that was a long time ago.
The rest is history.
Right. But I do remember my son, actually, after a couple years, he was then in high school, helping you out at one of your booths. I'm not even sure you were there.
Oh, I have a picture of it.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so the IEW booth was much smaller then,
Well,
Andrew.
that's what I was thinking. I don't really ever do the booth anymore. We have wonderful exhibitors who love representing us, and it's very efficient. So they basically get the stuff and set it all up according to the plan we give, and I just get to show up. But it is significantly different in terms of the space we need.
Yes.
But also, with the abundance comes a little bit of potential for overwhelm. So a new homeschool family who heard from a friend, about IEW, they look on the map, they navigate to the booth, they look at it and stand there kind of deer in the headlights. Where do I start? What is this?
Right.
Because we don't have, neat little boxed curriculum packages and all that. And it's interesting, the very first few conventions that I went to, and this is so kind of beautifully, not quite ironic, just beautiful. I think the first convention I was invited to, homeschool convention, as a speaker, was Oklahoma City.
Oh, interesting. Yep.
And I had never been to Oklahoma before.
Oh, well, and here you are.
And I came and I thought, that went really well.
Yeah, yep.
And never in my wildest thoughts would I have imagined living in Oklahoma.
Right.
But in the beginning, what did I have? I had VHS videos. The first set was just 4 videos, and then after 99, it became 6 videos plus 1 student workshop of your choice. The book that I had put together, which is about half as long as our current book, and then just some miscellaneous stuff.
Guide to Powerful Paragraphs. I think that was
Guide to Powerful Paragraphs.
Was on your menu.
We also had, I think, that set of source texts.
Right.
And it was just an envelope of some, articles and stories and pictures.
Yes, you had some for units 1 and 2, some for 4 and 6, and some for 5. You didn't have anything for 3 at that time, not the very beginning.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so people would say, well, how do you do this? And it was very easy.
Right.
You watch the teacher's seminar, and then you create your lessons that have interesting source texts that are at an appropriate reading level, at or below the reading level of the students. You simply gather these things together for each unit. You have extra source texts on the side for the students who can do more and want to. And that's the way we've been teaching it to people in Gruard for, 10 years. So
you forgot the checklist. Yeah, they also need the checklist too.
Well, yeah, they have to design
their own checklist.
So they design everything.
Yes.
But they know how.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
In retrospect, it's kind of amazing that with that minimal amount of information and help, there were so many people who were able to be successful.
Okay, so this is me sitting on this side of the table as Andrew's talking about how easy it is and how many people were able to be successful. This is one of those rare times that I can't tell if he's joking or not because I know the truth.
The easy was slightly sarcastic, but the successful people, that had to be true. Otherwise, we wouldn't have kept growing. If we didn't have parents and teachers out there doing it, there wouldn't be more people wanting to do it in the same way. But it wasn't until, I believe, 2001 that we had the very first of the theme-based writing lesson books.
And that was the same time or shortly before, because Bible-based was the very first Bible-based writing lessons.
Yep.
These were lesson plans. That's originally what you called them, was lesson plans. This is going to help you plan your lessons to teach structure and style to your students.
And the book was conveniently thin because it really only had 3 parts for each lesson.
Exactly.
The model is part of the unit structure. So each lesson would have a source text corresponding to the model, a little bit of practice for the stylistic techniques, and then the checklist that would add the new style techniques and correspond to the model. And that was about it.
Right. No teacher's
book.
No
teacher's book. No blanks already filled in. No vocabulary. No enrichment. None of that stuff that people so appreciate now. But it worked. It worked.
Well, and then was it shortly after that or at the same time you produced the student writing intensive videos?
That was right around the same time. And I had been doing it in the late 90s. I would just fly to a city and I would teach the kids Monday through Thursday, 4 days in a row, 2 hours and 45-minute class, 4 days in a row. And in the beginning, I limited to 12 students. And I remember the days of sitting in the hotel the night before, putting together, 36 binders and handwriting the tabs and being sure I had all the papers organized.
Wow.
And, I would spend hours the
No
day
wonder
before.
you limited it to 12.
Well, and then when I got confident, I went up to 18. And I think before I kind of quit doing that, I was in the 24 zone.
Well, and of course, this is now about the time that you and I got connected because of that introduction at that homeschool convention. I picked up the phone and I called IEW, and lo and behold, Mr. Poudois himself answered the phone.
Yeah,
and I said, will you please come down and teach my instructors and the parents that are a part of this program that I'm running. Oh, and by the way, could you teach some of these classes? And of course, since I was hosting the event, I made sure my boys got into your classes.
Yeah.
But I think over the years, we'd done that several years in a row. And
the 4 days plus for the kids plus 2 days for parents.
Yes, and I begged you to allow more and more students in, provided I could give you a competent helper to pass out papers and to help with the spelling questions and those kind of things. And
it worked really well.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time there was this little chapel there at Biola, and you packed in like 160 some people, and I was pretty impressed because that was about 4 times bigger than any seminar I had ever managed to put together myself. So
it was a requirement to get your kids in the class. You had to go to the teacher training.
So that was the student writing intensive.
Right.
And then I got a very decent recording of that. I had a bad recording in the 99. I got a better recording in 2001.
Yeah.
And so I started giving people the option. So I would say, step 1, learn our program with the TWSS. Then you have kind of these 3 options. One option, design your own lessons.
Right.
That's exactly what we teach you to do. Some people need a little help or they're very busy. I think busyness is most people's impediment. It's just how do you carve the time out to do all that planning? So if you want a little bit of help, we now have this Bible-based writing lessons. And I think right around that same time, we had the very first history-based writing lessons, which only had the title being history-based because there was only one, and it was, U.S. history. And Lori had been teaching these lessons and
Lori Verstegen,
tested them out. And she's a mom of 4 boys, so her source texts were very boy-friendly, which I have found to be really helpful. And so I'd say that's, one option. But if you want even more help, we have this student writing intensive. Right. But it was just 4 videos.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a semester or a year. And then we realized they needed in-between practice lessons. So then the student writing intensive became the 4 videos plus 3 or so practice assignments just like that one to put after so you could stretch it out to 12 weeks or so.
So if we were to hit the fast forward button and we would say then couple of theme-based books, student writing intensive, to today we now have 14 theme-based books that we can offer. And, of course, we have the marvelous Structure and Style for Students, which is not 4 videos. It is 24 videos.
And I remember the day we knew we had to redo the student writing intensive and the student continuation because it was just old and dated and mostly unstreamable.
Yeah, that was the big deal.
And then because it wasn't done as a unified project, there were disconnects. It didn't flow through the units, et cetera. And I remember we were talking about redoing this, and I said, well, why don't we just do a whole year, like 25 classes?
I about fell off my chair. I was ecstatic because that's exactly what we wanted to be able to provide our families to have a greater amount of success using our materials.
Yeah. But, when I'm standing at a booth, and if I happen to be there when the new person who knows little or nothing about IEW walks up and kind of has that glazed over, do I even want to engage here?
Right.
I pretty much have the same conversation, which is, here's the core of what we do.
Yep.
Teaching writing, structure and style for adults.
Yep.
This is our flagship.
Not only our flagship, it is unique to any other writing programs. So if you're having trouble teaching your kids, whether you're in a classroom or at home or in a hybrid school situation, it may be that the method that you're using isn't conducive to what you're working with. So try our method. Our method is very different. So that's the teaching, writing structure, and style.
Well, the method is always very different than most of what anyone would ever find.
Yeah.
The other thing, and this is part of the elevator speech, what differentiates.
Sure. Okay.
I would always say, well, one thing is we focus on the teacher. We teach the teacher or the teaching parent or the tutor. We teach them first, the whole system. Then we can offer these varying degrees of help. So my little spiel that I have given for 25 years really hasn't changed much. You can do it yourself. You can get a little bit of help with a book. You can get a whole lot more help with the video.
Right.
I guess the thing, a few things have changed in 20 years. One is just the prevalence of multimedia, video-based instruction has really proliferated.
Yeah.
And parents have really liked that. I remember meeting Steve Demme and Matthew C. We used Matthew C. A bit for our kids. And I remember meeting him, and he was one of the few people that had that video component. And so, he said, no, this is very effective because, the parents benefit from the added angle that comes from the video, and it's fun, it's engaging. And now, of course, you go to a homeschool convention, and there's video history and video music and video geography. And so we're just much more attuned to inviting, I would say, if you will, the experts into our homeschooling world through that very, I guess, controllable element of high-quality video.
Right.
And I never would have imagined, not in a million years, the power of video. People have said, well, picture's worth 1,000 words. Of course, that's only true if you could write 1,000 words about a picture, which is one thing we do help people do.
Yes.
But that being maybe the case, the video's worth 1,000,000. You cannot fit into a book all of the nuance and interactions and what Mrs. Ingham would call intangibles.
Exactly. Yep.
In that video experience. And every day we get testimonials, know, and I love the ones where it says, my son feels like he's right in the class. He talks to the screen. He raises his hand when you ask a question.
Yep.
I never would have imagined that response to something that seemed so kind of passive, if you will. So that's part of the magic of it.
Right.
And of course, I learned a long time ago, a live audience makes a whole lot better video than a studio video.
Right.
Technically, maybe the studio video has a few advantages, but there's nothing like talking to real people and getting real responses and then reacting to those real responses.
Well, and especially for you, Andrew, because you are so relational. And that's why kids love to go get your autograph because they already feel like you are their writing teacher.
And I don't know if the word spied would be the exact precise one, but I have looked at video of some of people who would probably be considered competitors, although their system is very often so different it's not really. But I look at those videos made just with the camera, and I just think, wow, that is not as engaging. And I will tell you the truth. I have watched some of my own videos.
Oh, you have?
I don't like to.
I know you don't.
But what I enjoy about them isn't watching myself. What I enjoy is watching the kids.
I know.
And I know the kids who watch it at home also enjoy seeing, their peers on screen.
Yep.
So, but we still have the same option. Design your own lessons.
Right.
Buy a book and get a little bit of help, the lesson plans. You don't have to figure out what to do Monday morning. Or, go with the videos. And each of those has advantages and different costs associated.
100%. And of course, the cheapest one, and we don't have much time left here, and I will say that we're going to talk more about this when you do a master class for our premium members.
Right.
And that is designing your own lessons. That's obviously the hardest thing to do, but it's the most costly in terms of time, but not costly in terms of money.
Right.
But it also gives you the most flexibility in terms of dealing with a variety of ages and abilities.
And when people are dealing with English as a second or foreign language, special needs circumstances, or even high talented, high aptitude, you might call gifted writer kids, those are the ones that it seems to be more valuable to be able to select the source text and adjust the checklists.
So there are a few questions that you ask yourself when you're designing a lesson. What are those questions?
Well, the first one is really easy. What unit is this?
Exactly.
Because you want your source text to fit Unit 2, where you take keywords from every sentence, Unit 1 and 2. So they can't be too long. The sentences can't be too long. Whereas with Unit 3, you have a lot more flexibility in terms of length of story. The guiding factor would be how much time do you have to read the story and talk about it. So while you could do Unit 3 with a one-page story, you could do Unit 3 with an 18-page story,
right,
or a whole book, but how much time do you have?
Right.
And, many of our theme-based books are being used in co-ops and, groups like Classical Conversations or Aquinas Learning. They're being used in hybrid school situations where the teacher's time is limited.
And even in full-time classrooms, they are being used as well.
Exactly. So keeping the stories appropriate to the content. Then Unit 4, you get into that funnel, and so you want to start kind of gradually. Okay, here's something with 15 facts. You get to choose 6 or 7. And then maybe the next Unit 4 assignment, well, here's something with 2 paragraphs. Each have about 20 facts, and you're going to write 2 paragraphs, and each of them have 6 or 7. So now you're limiting skill. And, selecting the source text to meet the unit. Unit 5, pictures, so find pictures, draw pictures, get people to draw pictures. That's fun. And then once you hit Unit 6, then that initial period of let's use something like what we used to use primarily was the mini books.
Right.
So some source texts that are contrived to have overlapping information so you can show kids and do together with them source outlines, fused outline, okay, final paragraph or paragraphs. And
in some ways, those source texts, well, in a lot of ways, those are the hardest ones to write because of what you identified. There has to be overlap for Unit 6 to work.
Right. But if you can do a couple Unit 6 projects with contrived source text.
Exactly.
Then when you say to the kids, okay, go get your own sources.
Right.
Hit the internet, hit the library. They know so much better what to do with those.
Right.
In fact, I remember, I think it was Year 1, Group A, and we finally took the plunge and said, okay, go get your own sources. I was a bit nervous. They weren't controlled like the contrived source text I had been providing and working. They all did so well. I remember just thinking, wow, that was a perfect runway for them to have success. And, of course, we've seen that in all the other groups and beyond. I was just a little worried about that, youngest set, grade 3 to 5. The second question I ask myself is this interesting? If it's not interesting, is it important enough to display something that might be more interesting? And I do notice that if you can see the kids kind of get that little spark after the first couple sentences of a source text, they're there. They're with it. They're engaged. They're like, wow, I didn't know that. That's cool. If you can get a kid to mentally say, that's cool, then everything goes better after that.
I loved watching the kids' faces for when we were shooting the videos. As you were passing out the source text, they were eagerly pre-reading it before you got around the room to get them all those papers. They knew it was going to be something interesting.
Is it going to be cool?
Yeah.
I think the one that surprised me that we came up with for Year 1, Level B, was the coconut crab.
Oh, yes.
source text for Unit 6.
Yeah.
And I ended up in 2019 doing a tour of the country, taking selected lessons from the SSS and doing them just a one day, one class, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And so I taught through that coconut crabs many times. And it's so funny, I did it once when we recorded it, and then I kind of forgot about it. And then I revisited it, and I thought, these are cool.
Yeah,
these coconut crabs are just really interesting, and you don't know about them or hear about them. And they're big and colorful and have weird behaviors. So I'm always looking to catch the imagination of the most reluctant student I might run into. The kids who like writing and, okay, it's pretty easy for me, they're a little more easygoing. And so whatever you give them, okay, I can do that. But the ones who don't really like the whole process, if you can catch their imagination, then it just goes so much better. Same with poetry.
Yeah.
You could take a poem. It's a beautiful, great poem, but it doesn't catch the imagination of the child like a poem that has some humor or some drama or maybe a little storyline. And so that it's just so that's the second question I would ask myself.
And the third question?
The third question would be, how does this source text lend itself toward the stylistic techniques?
Okay.
And I'll give you a simple example. I have noted that I like to have a source text that allows, when possible, me to use a couple of the banned verbs when we introduce that temporary idea of disallowing certain words to force them to look on a list for another one.
Right.
Well, the one that's the easiest is the word said. So if I can time it and I say, okay, I want to be introducing strong verb when I have a source text where people are talking.
Right.
Right? Then that's going to be easier than if I have a source text where it's more encyclopedic and there's no real opportunity for conversation.
Right.
So depending on the age and aptitude of the students, you might get to strong verb in Unit 2 with the high schoolers.
Right.
So you want an Aesop fable where characters are talking. You might get to strong verb in Unit 3 with younger students, maybe level B or maybe level A. So that's going to be a convenient match. So I'm always looking at a source text and thinking, when this thing goes into a keyword outline, and that's a good thing to do, is take a little time and try to keyword outline the source text that you have selected or created and see if it works for you pretty easily. If it doesn't, you don't want to go throwing that to kids and then have everyone frustrated. And then as you're looking at that, say, okay, so I'm on strong verb. So where are some sentences that are going to need some verbs? What are those verbs? Can we add one to the banned list so that we can talk about it in that context?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
And that goes with all the style techniques, ly, who, which, strong verb, because, clause, quality, adjective, when, while, where, since, of, although. Certain texts just fit better with those techniques. And then once they've got the hang of it, then you don't have to be so careful a second year or third year through. But that initial introduction goes so nicely when the style checklist expansion and the source text and the outline from it kind of fit together. And that's just a little bit of planning.
Good. Any other questions that you ask yourself when you're doing lesson planning for a new lesson that you're going to teach?
Well, what's my backup in case this flops?
Sure. Like any good teacher.
With our theme-based books, I know that Lori Verstegen, she tested all of that stuff with classes she was teaching. I have taught through several of the theme-based books myself and had input on revisions that we made. Narnia, I taught that through to see how that went. A couple others. And we're kind of in a process of constantly trying to make these things more consistent so there's less potential for confusion in terms of what do you do, first, second, third, fourth through the year. And being sure that the source texts meet those criteria and being sure the checklists are appropriately paced. There is a tendency, I think this is probably the thing I fell into, and I think a lot of other teachers fall into, and we've tried to back this up a little bit with the source text, which is you don't have to back this up a little bit with our checklists. You don't have to introduce a new style technique every single class.
No.
And the younger the students you're working with, the more dangerous that is. And even I thought, it's a new class, I got to do something new. Whereas with the, now let's have 24 lessons or 32 lessons in a theme-based book, right, to last a whole year, 30 or whatever. And we have some bonus stuff. But you don't have to add something to that checklist every single week. In fact, what works best is to have no new technique on the week that you introduce a new model.
Yep.
Just practice what you learned and do a couple like that. Then once the model is familiar, okay, now maybe we squeeze in the next style technique.
Right.
But there's no rush. And you don't have to get all the dress-ups done by October because you had 6 classes between the, September and October's. No, relax. So that's probably the biggest point I would think of to restrain myself.
Right.
And advice I would give to new parents and teachers.
Right. Well, I know it is possible to do exactly what you described because that's what I did all those years ago when I was first starting out because I didn't have an option.
And, sometimes to just put a clincher on this, sometimes I am standing at our booth at a convention and someone will walk up to me and I will think, wow, this is a fairly older looking homeschool mom or whatever. And she will say, well, been using IEW for 20 years and it's been great. And I just finished, my last kid, but I'm here with my oldest who's homeschooling their child.
Yep.
And, I never bought any of all that stuff except your original training course.
Right.
And that was enough. And I did great with all my kids did well. So there are people out there who learn it and do it. And we may not hear from them for a long time or maybe ever.
Yep.
And yet that's still always an option. But what's I think we find very satisfying is we have so many more options.
Yep.
We just have to help people navigate to the right one for them.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Andrew. This has been very helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, you can subscribe to this podcast in iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, or just visit us each week at iew.com/podcast. Until then, on behalf of Andrew Pudewa and the team at IEW, I thank you for allowing us to partner with you on your journey toward better listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking.